Originally, my father worked with his colleagues in the London Symphony Orchestra, to create the horn mouthpieces. And they are generally rather deep, so they make this very sort of rich, romantic sound. And he was also interested in making something suitable for younger players as well. So, as well as the ordinary narrow rim that horn players prefer, he was also making wide rim mouthpieces, which at the time is very much considered that the wider rim created a better playing habit. Uh, it, it, it encouraged, corners down, non-pressure kind of approach, which teachers very much liked. And there weren't many wide rim horn mouthpieces available at the time. Um, so the wide rims were very much developed for the education market. But actually, quite a lot of pro players like that as well, especially for doublers, because um, quite often people will graduate from trumpet to French horn, and they find that shift much easier if they're playing a wider rim. That very narrow horn rim feels very difficult for people who've grown up playing cornet or trumpet. Um, the f- Both the 5N and the 7N were developed with principal horn players from the London Symphony. I think the 5N, if I remember correctly, was developed with David Gray. And the 7N was developed with David's successor, another David Cripps. And David Cripps was the horn player who was the original horn player on Star Wars, who recorded those beautiful Princess Leia horn solos, which are so memorable. Um, and I would imagine probably quite a lot of horn players took up the French horn because they loved those horn solos so much. But that was with a 7N, classic 7N. Yeah, they're both lovely mouthpieces. As I said, they're both quite deep, but they're this mixture of the classic funnel, but with a bit of a cup as well. So they're somewhere between a funnel and a cup, and yeah, they work really well with this a lovely rich sound. Yeah, which I'm very fond of the English school of uh, French horn playing, if that doesn't sound odd. I mean, one of the things about French horn mouthpieces is that in the last, I would say, 30 years or so, that people are playing bigger and bigger equipment. So we we did extend our range to accommodate bigger mouthpieces because even first horn players, will play what 40 years ago would have been considered absolutely huge, but that is the way that fashions have gone. Um, the American market was slightly different because there was a, a a kind of style of playing which used a rather large horn with a rather small mouthpiece. I mean, for instance, the most famous exponent of that kind of style was Dale Clevenger in Chicago, who actually used what would be considered a minute mouthpiece these days, but in quite a large horn. But it worked for him. He's sounded absolutely terrific. He's such a famous horn player with such a thrilling sound. But yeah, these days people tend to use bigger mouthpieces than that. And that's why when we started developing the range with Paxman horns, we did make some, very small models within that range to accommodate mostly the American market. But it's also good for, people who want a small mouthpiece to help them with a high range or whatever. Yes, well, at the t time we had great success with the heritage mouthpieces. And one of the reasons they work so well is we considered very carefully where the mass of the mouthpiece was. So the mass is at the bottom of the cup, and the walls of the cup are quite thin. So it means you can get a powerful sound because you've got the mass there, but also it's rather responsive as well. Now, that's absolutely crucial when you're a French horn player because, especially if you're sitting on the first chair in an orchestra, you have to be able to float out these solos. And if you're playing a very heavy mouthpiece, it's very hard to feel that contact with the instrument. You lose a lot of sensitivity in your playing, I think. I always say that, it's only the strongest players can play those very, very heavy mouthpieces. So when we developed the Paxman range, we our mouthpiece engineer made 7 prototypes of different weights, ranging from the very, very lightweight to the very, very heavy. And I guess it's predictable, but the very heavy ones felt very dead. They were very powerful, but they had little life to the sound and very hard to shape a phrase beautifully if you're not getting any feedback from the instrument. And at the other range, the very light ones sounded very light. They didn't have a good core to the sound. And of the 7 prototypes we made, the one everybody said was best was the one right in the middle. It's like, Goldilocks porridge. It wasn't too hot and it wasn't too cold. It was the one which was not too heavy and not too light. And that is the model that we make to this day. And yeah, we we sort of looked at the most popular styles, and they would be the 5.5 in that range. But we go up to the smallest one, which is a 9, and the bigger models like the 2 and the 3 and the 4. We worked with Tim Jones, the long-serving principal horn of the London Symphony Orchestra. I think he's the longest serving principal horn in the history of the orchestra, actually. But we um, we worked with Tim on that rim just to get the curvature absolutely right, so you have the flexibility you need and the comfort that you need. And yeah, we were able to reproduce that across all the different sizes. Um, the outside shape did create a little bit of controversy because it doesn't look anything like a horn mouthpiece. It looks, well, I don't know what it looks like, maybe a cornet mouthpiece or something. That, those thinner cup walls, they definitely seem to bring out the upper partials in the sound. You hear more color in the sound, which you don't get with, heavy, heavy mouthpieces or even with just ordinary mouthpieces, really. Um, yeah, it's hard to explain, but I put it down partially just to the player feeling very comfortable with the sound they're making because they're getting this little bit of information back from the instrument, and it allows them to play in a very natural way because I mean that the mouthpiece is always the interface between the instrument and the player. And if that feels right and the player feels confident and is confident they're making a nice sound, I think that really comes out. So yeah, I think that's partly the reason why those Paxman mouthpieces are so successful.